So working at HSBC is great for a couple of reasons. One is just the scale. We're in 60 countries, 40 million customers, and we're looking at what's happening in terms of customer behavior, whether it's in China, whether it's in the US, obviously in Europe, and Latin America. And so one of the really exciting things is saying, can we take an experience or something that's working in one country, and will that work somewhere else, and can we make that happen? And then the other thing I would say that really stands out is the application of some of our data techniques and our technology. So we've got the scale to be able to invest in some of these areas that if we were just in one or two countries probably would be harder. So we can go and look whether it's now machine learning and artificial intelligence. 2 or 3 years ago it was a real focus on biometrics, and we've got the scale that we can go and say, how does this really help our customers? What can we do differently? So working out how we organise our teams is a big challenge. And I joined from Google to HSBC, and one of the big changes I've been trying to make is moving from what I call project management to product management. So project management is where you had a team and some senior executive team would set an objective and try and put a team together to get the project done, and then it's finished and it disbands and people go on to another project. Product management, I think, is much more where you have an ongoing roadmap of improvements, whether it's to the customer experience or it could be to do with security. And the team itself has their own roadmap for the future. And that's both the services that can be built internally, potentially it involves partnerships, it could involve acquisitions and other areas. So a big aspect that I've been trying to do is build a very different way of working. And it's not just on the business side roles, it's the same in technology, where we've been growing our ability to have solution architects, because traditionally in banks we had enterprise level architects and we had people who owned big applications. Well, now we've got these really exciting but difficult jobs of people who have to say what's the right technical solution for particular problems, and we're building that. And just to give one really tangible example, when I joined, most of the organisation was organised around the products, the financial products. It was a mortgage, it was a loan, it was savings, and we had the same in our corporate bank. And that meant, for example, how we onboard customers and make sure we do the know your customer and the due diligence wasn't really owned. So we've created a team, which we call in this case originations or onboarding, which cuts across the products. And that's a good example again of how we're organised differently, and I think creates some really quite exciting roles across the business and the data and the technology teams to make that happen. We're building a lot now of partnerships for a couple of reasons. Firstly, people talk about the ecosystem, and that sounds a bit sort of jargony, but really what it means is that in the world that we are heading to, banks will need to partner. And to take a really simple example, 50 years ago, if you were setting up a bank, you would have branches, and you would put your branches on a busy high street or a main street because that's where consumers would hang out, it's where businesses would hang out. Well, in the online world, you've got to hang out again where people are, and if that means that they're hanging out on WeChat or on Facebook, we need partnerships in order to have a presence where that is. And then also we need partnerships in order to help people in their lives, whether it's the purposes for money, whether that's how they spend their money, whether it's saving money, whether it's for their health, for their children's education, and therefore we need to have partnerships in those areas. And in that context, there are some key enablers of that. And one of the enablers is the API world and actually open banking. So some people think the banks have been resistant to open banking. Actually, it's the opposite. As an example, with our first direct part of our business, we had a partnership with Yodlee about 10 years ago, which we had to shut down for regulatory reasons around the access to customers' data from other bank accounts. And open banking now allows us to do that. So the APIs and the PSD2 area is actually quite helpful for a lot of banks because it allows us both to have partnerships to help our customers in the different aspects of their life, as well as actually on the distribution side in terms of partnering with where all of our consumers are spending their time in the online world. So banking is going to be different 10 years from now, but not in always the way I think people think about. And I sometimes talk about a recipe kit for financial services, and I think this applies whether you are a bank or you are a different business, you might be a retailer thinking about financial services. And I think the recipe kit falls into three big buckets. The first is you've got to get the basic experiences right. You've got to make it easy for people to open an account on a mobile phone, change their address, top up their loan, manage their own fraud protection in these areas. And that's now doable, and we think we can make that work. But it's not as easy as some people think, because as we know all the regulations and the different constraints that go into that. But that's the first part. The second part is to create a very different experience for customers that's what we call personal and relevant to them. So to take a really simple example, most people don't like thinking about their pension or their retirement savings, and they do it very occasionally, whereas actually there's lots of activity we could do more frequently to help optimize that. Or for people who regularly spend more than they can sensibly afford, we would love to create the experience that people feel as good for saving the money they might have spent on the coffee as that quick thrill people get from having that little caffeine shot in the morning. So making the personal and relevant experience part of everybody's day-to-day life is the second part of that recipe kit. But it's the third part that's going to be really interesting over the next 10 years, and that's about creating new types of financial services propositions. It's starting to do things for people that they couldn't have done in a pre-digital and a pre-data world. And that's where a lot of the big data and the analytics that we're looking at comes into play. It's actually also we're thinking about people who are, we talk about generation rent, the people who are not going to be able to buy property, which has been a big form of savings accumulation for other generations, and that may not work. Or it's protecting people against unforeseen activities. We know there's a lot of effort now that's around some of the phishing attacks and the other fraud prevention devices. And so I think what we're also going to see is a change in the next 10 years, often with partnerships and different providers, and it will give people a different reason about why do you choose to bank with who you choose to bank with. So mostly people choose because either it's a better mortgage rate or the credit card offers are better. I think we're going to see some different reasons why people choose to bank with one provider or another in 10 years' time.